And kingship is Torah Sheba'al Peh, the ability to be humble and the ability to procreate, as we were saying before about like the earth itself is procreating in this dynamic way, receiving and then giving. So too in our learning, there is the planting, there's the seeds, and then there's the growth, there's the reaping, there's the different types of vegetables and fruit and grains and whatnot. And all those are analogies of different types of wisdom that is planted and is Torah Shebe'al Peh, is studied with the mouth. What's the mouth over here? The mouth over here is the mouth of Malchut. That the earth itself is speaking, that the earth itself is receiving this depth, right? This oneness of the Creator. Because if it's just Torah Shebichtav, then it's above us. It's lofty, or we could interpret it again in any ways that we want. But if it's within us, again, Ruth from the word satiation, it's satiated within us. And we become satiated, we satiate back the Creator, as the Zohar so beautifully put it. So that is really the Torah. That is really the giving of the Torah on the visceral level. That the Torah descends all the way down to this world, descends all the way down to my life, descends all the way down to the here and now, to the work that I do within me, with the humility and the ego that I contend with on a daily basis, with the anger and the depression and the sadness and the giving and all the slew of complexities that are found within my earth, within me. So it's not just a theoretical idea, which is what the Torah could potentially be, but it's meant to be received, and that's why it's called Kabbalat HaTorah, not just the giving of the Torah, but the holiday of Shavuot is the receiving of the Torah. The receiving of the Torah is the receiving of the Torah Shebe'al Peh and the Torah Shebichtav. That the Torah Shebe'al Peh accentuates and brings out the Torah Shebichtav, which is why we are called, well, first of all, Moshe is called a sofer, a scribe. And the Talmidei Chachamim and the Torah scholars are called sofrim. Ezra was called Ezra HaSofer. And the Talmud tells us that if the Torah wasn't given by Moshe, pretty amazing, the Torah could have been given by Ezra. That's how great Ezra was. And he was called Ezra HaSofer, Ezra the scribe. But why are they called scribes? Because there's the level of the interpretation of the Torah is now able to make sense and to write and to interpret the deeper meaning of the written Torah. And that's why the Torah scholars are called Sofrim, Divrei Sofrim, the words of the Sofrim. And who writes a Torah scroll? A Sofer, a human being, right? And who basically decides when Passover is going to be. It is the Beit Din, who are humans, but they're humans in this world that, again, they're not like the rabbis that are giving they're waving some, something to make something kosher, or to, they're doing this heebie-jeebie kind of stuff. It's like the rabbis, right? The oral tradition, right? Going all the way back to Moshe, who received the Torah, he was called a sofer, is something that is received in an unbroken chain to this day. Pretty amazing. No other nation, no other people on earth have this. And it is the reason why the world hates us. The Talmud says this. Why is it called Har Sinai? Misham yarda sin'a laolam. Even though it's spelled differently, samech and sin'a, right, and it's sin. But the Talmud says from there hatred came out to the world. Whether whether Jews adhere to the Torah or they follow it or not, and the only reason why the Jewish people, whatever is left of, what should have been millions upon millions of Jews in the world right now, is because somewhere in our background, and probably like a generation or two before, we um, we had this connection not just to the written Torah, but to the oral Torah, right? Which is so on Shavuot in the temple, in the Beit HaMikdash, we brought a special offering called the Shtei Halechem, the 2 loaves of bread, right? And spiritually, there's this whole evolution of like getting to bread, right? We start off on Passover, we don't have any bread. We don't have any chametz. We go through this whole evolution of 49 days where we're basically working on our barley type of animalistic self. And then we evolve to this place that on Shavuot, we are able to now go back to eating bread. And we could eat bread and we could face ourselves and our animal self, and we could see the trigger and yet at the same time be above it and come from the divine soul self. So the Shtei Alechem is really the divine soul, the animal soul coming together, and it's on a divine level, right? Chita is 22, Gematria 22, which corresponds to the 22 letters of the alphabet. And so we evolve to that. But the Talmud tells us that what's the idea of the Shtei Alechem, the 2 loaves of bread? Keneged Torah shebichtav v'Torah sheba'al peh. The 2 loaves of bread represent the Torah that was written and the oral Torah, this evolving, ever evolving Torah, which comes into our lives, into the here and now, into the actual technology of what is happening in the generation that we live in. So it's not this weird something out there, but it's something that's here. And now there's the interpretation of now how does it work for us in our lives in the here and now. And on a spiritual level, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, and also that is what Kabbalah actually means. Kabbalah means Torah Sheba'al Peh, where we are actually become receivers of Hashem. Really, on the most basic level, Kabbalah isn't just this lofty, just like rocket ship out of this world, like wisdom. It's like that's some people think not the people that are here, hopefully. It definitely has these high elements, but the ultimate element of what we call Kabbalah, which is Torah Sheba'al Peh, is that how is God found within me in the here and now? Mamash here, now, עכשיו. איפה השם נמצא עכשיו? בתוכי. Where's Hashem found? Within me. Outside of me. It's the same God. There's that oneness of him, of her, right? Shechina, the Malchut, and it's united. And it's here and now. And by the way, it says that the Jewish people, that God held the mountain over the people. And why did he hold the mountain? Kafat har kegigit, the Talmud says. That God held the mountain over their head, and it's basically, if you don't accept the Torah, I'm going to drop this. So how did they say Nasev and Ishma? We will do and then we will listen. We kind of like had no choice. And we would have just, what does that mean? It says later on, we really accepted the Torah on Purim out of joy and out of really a desire to do so. But God held the Torah over our heads. So the Talmud says in Tractate Shabbat, page 98, the Talmud says where this whole like Talmud kind of like goes, the Talmud goes into the beautiful uh happenings of the giving of the Torah over there in that Talmudic page. So it says, why did God hold this mountain, the mountain, right? It's an analogy over our heads. So the idea is that we accepted already, Na'aseh v'nishma, the Torah shebichtav, the written Torah, but not the oral Torah, right? The oral Torah is a little bit difficult to swallow because now it's going to mean that I have to stop being like two-faced or doing what I want to do or just going in the direction that I want to take the direction in or do whatever. I need to actually have what we call nullification, bitul. I have a question on how something is done, so I ask the Rav. I ask like I want to get that divine guidance, not because the Rav is now this godlike or beyond and holds power over me or whatever it is, but because I want to understand the divine mechanisms and how it can be applied to me in my life in the here and now. That's really why the mountain was held over the heads of the Israelites, because we didn't accept the Torah Shabbat Pes. We were like, because the ego can't do that. Why would the ego want to do that? The ego doesn't want to have any sort of yoke over it, doesn't want to do something that it feels uncomfortable with. It doesn't want to go beyond itself because that's what an animal is, behema, right? The nefesh abahamis, the animal soul is just happy, just doing its thing. So the animal soul, right? That behema, that earthiness of ours, the materialism of us needed to be seeped into, needed to be satiated with this greater awareness. So God held this mountain, and the Alter Rebbe says, what does this actually mean? Right? So on the literal level, when you read the Talmud, when you read the Talmud, God held the mountain over their heads, and he was going to drop it, and you almost like could see that from some cartoon or something like, but like, what does that mean on a deeper level? So the Alter Rebbe says, what does the mountain represent? Ahar, we say this on Kabbalah Shabbat on Friday night right? We say, right, Harim kadonagna masu milifnei Hashem, that the mountains melt like wax from the awe of Hashem. And the mountains represent awe. And we all know that, right? When we walk in a beautiful mountainous area and we see those beautiful, powerful cliffs and mountains and that vastness, we're filled with awe when we see that. And so the Ha over there, when God held the mountain over their heads, God awed them as if, right? There was this revelation of awe, awesomeness. That's what it means. That the people were like, whoa, did you feel that? Did you see that? There was like this, right? When you have this transcendental, this divine experience, which is what they had. It's an experience of and the Torah says that the entire world was seeped with this awareness of God, heaven and earth merging together without any echo, because the echo would mean that it's not seeping within the earth. That's what an echo is, but it says there was no echo, the Talmud tells us. It just went into the earth. And it went into the people's earth And that's what it means. God held the mountain over their heads. That there was this wowing, this revaya, again, this satiation of wonder, this level of all of all of existence, right? Was just a revelation of all of of the oneness of all of existence. So the people felt this awe, and their actual biology changed. Their actual brain chemistry and their wiring changed. That's really what happened. There was a shifting in the actual DNA, in the actual biology of the people. And so now they're not Israelites anymore. Now they're called what? Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, right? Are Yehudim. That became Yehudim, right? Not just because of Yehuda, which I'm personally not from Yehuda, I'm from Levi, right? And yet we're called Yehudim. Why? Because we became Yehudim because we reached this level of hoda'ah, hodaya, of this awesomeness, where all we could do is hoda'ah. We could just say thank you. We could just like say to Hashem, like, right? Ma shiv la Hashem, kol tagmuloi alai, kos yishot esa, uvshem Hashem ekra, right? And King David says, kosi revaya, my cup is revaya, is full. And the Talmud tells us that when Mashiach comes, we're going to be eating this amazing festive meal, shor bar, this big, like fatty, like kind of meat, and the Leviathan um, uh, uh, fish. And of course, what this means on a spiritual level, the physicality of the world and the spirituality. And King David is going to bless everyone with this big cup of wine, which is the gematria of Revaya. King David is going to show up, and basically God is asking, who's gonna bench for us? Who's gonna actually hold a cup? And there's this cup that has this amount of 216 of 221 measurements. And King David, gematria revaya, and King David is the gematria from the ancestry of Ruth, of revaya, of being absolutely satiated with the awareness of God, and raising this cup and acknowledging and saying back to Hashem, right? Shevet Yehuda, right? Not Benjamin or Yosef, which is Yesod, but actual Malchut, Yehuda, is acknowledging the Yehuda of Yehudim, right? Acknowledging this awesomeness of the Creator, right? And praising Hashem for this. So yeah, so I feel like we said a lot, and I just want to kind of like circle with this to an experiential level, to like a real level that we all find ourselves in, right? So we find ourselves, this is something that really came forth for me this year, which kind of like really got me to connect to Ruth, feeling ourselves in the field. Once again, this field. And what is this field? This field is this place where we feel as foreigners. We don't feel included. We feel like the outsiders. We're not part of the clique, the cool club. We're sitting by ourselves in lunch, right? We're being ignored by some caretaker or whatever it is. And we're in this field, we feel all alone when we're in this place of this field, which is what Ruth was feeling. She was this ger, right? Feeling alone, being on a quest for something that she couldn't even put her finger on. What am I actually searching for? What do I really want? And she's in this field. And that's the beginning of everything. That's the beginning of the lineage of King David. That's the beginning of this power of prayer that we spoke about. And that's the beginning of the Jewish people trusting, going out into the desert / field, not having everything in place. Everything is, being messy, maybe a little bit unkempt, maybe a little ugly, or in our perception, it's like, or we know the story of the ugly duckling and, really. But sometimes we have this image of ourselves, and the Jewish people were basically, it says, we're not so recognizable, um, when we were taken out of Egypt. But we went out, we had this trust, we had this belief. We have this emunah, and it says that bischara emunah nigalu, that in the merit of the emunah, we were redeemed. And the beginning of all of this process, the catalyst of all this process, is our belief in God and our belief in ourselves. And that is very important to know, that the belief in ourselves is just as important as the belief in God. We cannot have true belief in God if we don't believe in ourselves. Because if God is some existential reality, it's kind of like that Torah shebichtav. Yeah, God is so great, but I'm so like whatever, and I'm not deserving, and I'm can't do, and I'm right. And it's basically the mistake of Ploni Almoni in a way. He's like, well, I don't know, I don't know if I could do this. I don't know if this is for me. And Ruth found herself in the field with this belief, and she decided to cling on to something. And that's what it says, that she kissed Naomi. Orpah had this disconnect of the orif, of her nape, her mind and her heart. And although she wanted the right thing, but she couldn't do it. And Ruth, from the word vaya, again, to satiate, she was able to satiate her mind with her heart. She was able to bring these two opposites, again, the shtei halechem, the two loaves coming together, these opposites that come together as one. The Torah shebichtav, Torah shebal peh, the mind and the heart, the belief in God, the belief in myself. And she found herself trusting herself, walking on the field, and knowing that if she went to this length, God is not going to let her down, because it is ultimately going to be good, and it is good here. So this deep level of conviction of emunah, this deep level of prayer, which is really, the deepest expression of emunah, is prayer, which according to the Ramban, actually you can't command us to pray, right? According to the Rambam, he says it is, and whatever. There's different opinions on whether you can consider prayer an actual commandment. So it says in the Torah, "Va'vadetem," you should. But the Ramban says, without a belief in God, why are you praying? And that's why, like, when you tell someone, why don't you daven, why don't you pray? like the deeper question is like, not should you go through the semantics of praying and go through the motions of praying. There's the connection before that needs to be there, right? And sometimes with our children, our loved ones, whatever it is, we're like, you should be doing this and you should be saying these words, but maybe this person should be, they should be feeling into more of like what they're actually connected to. And if they connect to that, of course they're going to want to talk to that source. Just like the earth is always talking to Hashem. Again, the earth is always dependent on Hashem, is always singing to Hashem. Every animal is always singing to Hashem. We as human beings have this separation of mind and heart, where our minds are like, I came here and I'm going to live forever. And all of life is to make as much money as possible, to be the most powerful creature, to enjoy to have as much pleasure of the world as possible, and then I've lived my life. And people are so short-sighted, right? Like King David speaks about in Tehillim and all that. It's like, you're going to amass all this money, you're going to leave it to others, you're going to do all these things, you're going to, nothing, what's going to come of it? What's the whole point of all of it? And so the deeper connection is the connection of the mind and the heart, whereas we as humans are disconnected like Orpah, Goliath, who are so big. We build like skyscrapers and we build, huge industries that are, many of them are ruining our earth, right? Are polluting our ecosystem, are full of there's an ocean. This is so sad. In the middle of the ocean, there's an island of plastic bags. Ugh. Oh, right. And the amount of like cutting down of the trees and the disrespect that we as humans have for our earth, for our land, for the land that Hashem has given to us. And that's Orpah. That's that Goliath mentality of like, I will be here forever. I will, I'm so big. I'm so powerful. I'm such a big company. Exxon, petroleum, and on and on and on. And building and smog and pollution and weather control. It's the saddest. It's just, I was in New York and I was walking with my brother and we saw this airplane just like kind of like emit this white kind of like tail. And we were with my child and his son, and we're like, what is that? And my brother's like, well, it's for weather control. And my son's little boy was like, why would they do that? Why would they do that to our earth? Like, why would? And I'm like, that's a really great question. I don't know. I don't know. But we're disconnected. That's the point. That's the point. But that's not the point really at the end. The point is really to connect our mind and heart, which is basically the Shtei Alechem Shavuot, right? Yeah. It's to connect our mind and our heart, where we are now on this field, walking humbly, as Ruth did, in service of God, listening to God, listening to Hashem, listening to what Hashem wants of me, to being an embodiment of Hashem's will. Hashem Adonai Sfatai Tiftach is actually the letters Ishti, my wife, which has to do with basically the feminine, this idea of Ruth, Adonai Sfatai Tiftach is Rashi Tevot Ishti. Open up my mouth, because that's listening from the realm of Malchut, of kingship. So we read the book of Ruth for many reasons. And ultimately, the book of Ruth really brings us to this place where we find ourselves as a Ruth, because we're all Ruth, and we're both either Ruth or Orpah, in a sense, right? We have a choice of what do we want to embrace. Do we want to embrace a life of disconnect, potential disconnect? Or do we want to embrace a life of satiation, a life of connection, which takes work, which takes basically working on our ego and not doing anything and everything that just self-serves us. It self-serves. If it self-serves us, it doesn't self-serve God and the world, right? So asking, how can I be of service, right, to the world, is really the question that Ruth was really asking. So the answer is loud and clear. She became the mother of royalty. She became, but not a royalty which is above the world and haughty and whatever, but she became the mother of royalty, of why am I here? Because that's what Mashiach really reveals. Mashiach reveals this unity in the world. That's the story of Mashiach, the story of the Torah Shebaal Peh and the Torah Shebichtav, these two higher realms, lower realms, connecting as one, right? Becoming unified. The Shtei Alechem. And that's the revelation which we can allow ourselves to experience more and more of. And the more that we do that, the more that we bring Mashiach, the more that we bring Ruth inside of us. And yes, we're going to see all these Goliaths and Orpahs, when we drive to the big city or whatever it is, or, wherever you are, there are these individuals that are there. But do I choose to be Ruth? Do I choose to be that Torah, that dove that sings out to Hashem, that listens and also singing praise and is in service, right? And is bringing Geula consciousness, and is bringing redemption consciousness to my life, like being in a redemption consciousness frequency, right? Because that is the collective. Mashiach is going to really reveal that on the collective level. We're all just doing that on the personal level, right? Individual. We're doing that. But I think there's more and more and more of like these little like Boaz heard a halacha, and then Ruth showed up and he was like, oh wow, I just learned that. And it was like, yes, I think like there's a lot of seeds that have been planted, and they are planted in the world, where little by little, it's taking a while, but I think it's definitely accelerating now, where we're feeling a lot very, very strongly and very, very quickly, and things are accelerating. And to just know that to hold on, to know that to hold on, as we are on the fields, to believe in Hashem, believe in ourselves, to breathe, take deep breaths in, to release, to allow that space of wonder, of awe, to be more prevalent in our lives, not just the sensational negative news that is constantly lingering all over, around us, right? But to allow in this wonder, right, which is all around us, right, when we experience the here and the now. And so to just embrace that truth, reality. It's not a reality which is outside of you. It's a reality which is right here, and it is inside of you. It's inside of your field. And it's how you choose to see and tend to your field.